Hi, sociology students. It's Mrs. T again, and I wanted to give you a tour of this document that you'll find linked in our weekly folder. I call this the master list or a master notes page. And let me start off by saying that this is optional. I am not going to take this up from you. I'm not going to check it to see if you filled this kind of stuff in. I'm just providing this to you with a suggestion for you to use it, or at least organize your notes in a way that you can easily find the different size things that we're going to be referring to in sociology class this semester. So you've already watched a video about the difference between macro and micro components of daily life and things in society. And so that, we start out the semester with that information because we've got to train our brains to be able to analyze society and the topics that we're going to discuss in our intro to sociology class. We've got to train our brains to look objectively at the world around us, and some things are part of a larger social pattern, like the macro scale stuff we discussed, and some things are part of micro scale ways that we interact at the one-on-one level among humans, and even among, items that we have in the world around us. You can even use these sociology concepts to analyze life in the metaverse, for instance, which is not, reality. It is a virtual reality. Anyway, so let me just show you what this document is doing, and how you should watch the video lectures, what you should do when you're taking notes, because my expectation is that you will take notes on all of the topics that the video lectures cover. I make the video lectures with specific information and specific examples to help bring you to an understanding and give you the tools that you need in order to draw conclusions. So this class and the assignments in it, I designed. I don't pick them up from the web. You can't use ChatGPT to help you with this homework, because I change them every single semester. And so there isn't an archive online for you to be able to just program something into ChatGPT or any of the other AI services available to students these days. You can't just plug stuff in, because this is like Mrs. Terrell's content specifically. So I have designed this worksheet kind of thing, notes page, just to kind of show you how you should organize your own notes. And you can certainly use this one if you'd like. You can copy and paste this into a Word document or whatever kind of word editing program that you have and add to it. But I want you to understand early on that we are going to talk about lots of different levels of society, human interaction, and they range from macro level, which is large scale, or even mega macro, like we'll talk about many, many different times between now and the end of the semester. And they bridge from macro and even mega macro levels all the way down to the micro level, which is the you and me side of daily life. How do we frame, the rules of our interaction? Where do they come from? Where's the origin of those rules? That kind of stuff. And so what we're going to do a lot in class is we're going to constantly be making connections between mega macro scale parts of society, such as, well, I've got listed some very general things here like social facts or cultural patterns. But let's talk about a cultural pattern briefly that I'm sure you've heard a lot, the word patriarchy. So patriarchy is not an American thing. It is an extremely common social pattern of hierarchy of power and duties. It's how we divide up job duties in social life. And this is a pattern that you find most commonly all around the world. There are very few societies that are not organized in a patriarchal kind of way. And so when we talk about patriarchy, it's not a bad word. It's just a way that we organize society. We human beings, not just Americans, but human beings in general, have to have a way to organize power structures and divide labor up in a society. And the most common way of doing that throughout all of history, because it's based on natural law, is called patriarchy. And so and we'll talk about it much more later. I'm not going to go off on a tangent in this where we, learn about patriarchy deeply right now. But that's one of those things that I would put under the mega macro part of social life, because it doesn't just affect our society. It is a pattern that you find all over the world, wherever you look. And because it is a pattern that exists as this huge umbrella over our society, lots of other smaller things that affect us on a daily basis come from this pattern that we call patriarchy. So just for instance, taking a last name. When some women don't take the last name of their husband when they get married, but the custom is for a woman to take the last name of her husband when she gets married. And when a woman is born, she has the last name of her father. And if she has the last name of her mother, well, guess what? Her mother's last name was her mother's father's last name. So this is just part of the daily life experience that is affected by a mega macro pattern like patriarchy, for instance. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of those things, and it'll be so much simpler for you to complete your projects that I'm going to assign to you. It'll be so much simpler for you to do that if you organize your notes and differentiate in your notes what is macro, what is mega macro, what is micro, and what are the bridges between macro and micro. So for instance, mid-level things, we're going to talk about social norms that exist. We're going to talk about statuses and roles, like mother and father are two different statuses and they have different duties associated with them. Mother, caregiver, father, breadwinner, traditionally, right? And those traditional patterns of how you're supposed to behave in that status that you might occupy now or at some point in the future, the traditional expectations that society has for those rules or for the ways that you have to behave, comes from that mega macro pattern called patriarchy. Okay. So what we're going to be doing in this class this semester is constantly highlighting different pieces of society that exist in the great big umbrella overlapping us, but also how it affects the you and me expectations that we have of each other in our daily life and our daily social groups, and how it structures the patterns that we live out from the day that we're born until the day that we die. We are not able to make all of our own decisions. It turns out our society has a structure in place, kind of like a maze. Some people might call it a matrix, although I don't want to use that term in like a conspiracy theory type way. But there is a pattern that exists in our society that guides our behaviors toward a certain trajectory. And if we live in U.S. culture, if we live in France and live in French culture, if we live in South Africa, if we live in Cambodia, all of these different places have different cultural expectations for the entire population. And that exists on the macro scale, and our daily life is played out on a regular basis because those patterns exist, and whether we know it or not consciously, we are following those patterns. And so that's why it's really important to differentiate, like, why am I doing this way? Why am I in college, for instance, to get a higher education? Well, perhaps on the macro scale, the economic structure requires that if you are going to be qualified for high-paying jobs that have income potential that you desire, or promotion potential that you would like to have over the course of your working life, these kinds of things require more than just a high school diploma. And so that's why you're here, and it costs money. So some of you are going into debt, and you're going to have to use some of that higher income that you make in that higher earnings job to pay off that debt. And it's a big cycle. And so some of the debt that you get in is not necessarily really your own choice to do that. If you're going to play by society's rules, you have to, pay for some things that are not free in order to get ahead, like society tells us. So anyway, please keep in mind these kinds of interesting things that we have to talk about this semester. But also, let me get back to the purpose of this video. You have to, in some kind of way, keep track of your notes. You have to take notes on every single video. It's really not optional. If you don't, you're going to have a harder time completing the work that's assigned to you over the course of the semester. All of your quizzes are going to come from the video content, so you need at least very quick notes on the video content in order to answer quiz questions. All of the reaction paper topics for a particular week are going to come from that particular week's video content or the reading assignment. So you have to watch the videos and take some notes so that you have something to choose from to write a reaction paper about. You are also going to have to refer to this stuff with the notes that you take from the videos when you are completing your projects. And the projects have higher point values. And these projects are going to ask you to do things like identify macro scale parts of social structure, identify how those things affect you on the micro scale. There's the, so there's the macro and the micro part. And then I'll ask you questions like, okay, if this is macro and that's micro, what's the bridge between those two? And that's the mid-level thing. And I will have covered all of those things. Let me turn my ringer off on my phone. You probably hear it. I will have covered all of those things with you in the lecture videos. And if you take notes and keep track of how often I say things like, this is macro scale, this is mid scale, this is micro scale, and you organize your notes that way, it's going to be so much easier for you to complete those projects. And the course learning outcomes, all 4 of the course learning outcomes, require elements of this macro scale understanding, mid-level bridge to the micro scale part of social structure. All 4 of those course learning outcomes require a knowledge of that in order to master them. And so it's kind of important. Okay, so please text me with questions and I will see you next time. And remember, this is optional. You don't have to use my format, but please, 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 whatever format you opt to use, please keep track of what's macro, what's mid, and what's micro. Bye.